Kia ora, you're listening to Ka Tū Maia, a podcast series for those who want to create a better future, featuring real stories from some of South Auckland's most innovative community change makers. Listen in as they share the highs and lows, the passion and the persistence, the mighty wins and the epic fails. It's a real and raw kōrero that will leave you inspired and equipped to take the next step in your purpose-driven journey. Ka Tū Maia, be brave. Kia ora whānau, and welcome back to our second episode here with these incredible change makers in South Auckland or Manukau. Today we have the absolute pleasure of having Amber Taylor from Art of Journeys and Jerome Tairi from South Auckland Young Entrepreneurs with us today. Kia ora kōrero, how are you doing?
Kia ora, kia ora.
Kia ora, kia ora.
I'm doing okay. Today we're going to talk about the awesome topic of knowing yourself, kōrero. And how important it is when you have a goal or a dream to make a difference in this world, to really know who you are and where you're coming from and the strength that lies within that. So I'm looking forward to an awesome kōrero today. I know it's going to be the bomb. There's some really challenging ideas, I think, that can come through this topic, but something that's really fundamental to your success when you're really putting yourself out there on behalf of you, your whānau and your people. So we're going to kick off with a couple of introductions. I'd love to get to know you both a little bit more, hear what makes you tick, a little bit about where you came from, and then also the initiative that you run here in South Auckland. So we'll start with you, Jerome. Kia ora e hoa.
Kia ora. Yeah, so my name is Jerome. I created South Auckland Young Entrepreneurs. I'm originally actually from Tokoro, a little bit of background. From Tokoro, grew up small town New Zealand. Similar demographic, similar kind of world as South Auckland in terms of
all the pine trees, eh? It's just exactly the same.
Exactly the same. There's so many pine trees in Manurewa. But you grew up there, lived there all my life, and I guess through life, this desire to help the less fortunate kind of grew in me. I realised, hindsight, when you look back on your life. And moved to South Auckland, or Auckland kind of over a decade ago from Wellington. Spent a lot of time in the corporate space, a lot of time dealing with business owners, and a lot of time working with young people. It was like the full-time job outside of the full-time job. And I wanted to combine those two worlds. And so an opportunity came up with Foundation North to kind of get a project off the ground to bring those two worlds together, the corporate training stuff, the business stuff, and working with rangatahi. And so I pulled together the project for South Auckland Young Entrepreneurs to help educate, empower and enable young people in South Auckland for success. Success being this kind of broad, generic term in which we define, but and then it put forward that application, and they loved the initiative and loved the thought and the innovation around it, and agreed to come on board, and so that's where that kind of got started. I don't know if we talk a bit more about the project or not, or
just give a little overview of what it is, because it's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a couple of programs that I started with, and one is called Confident, Resilient and Driven. The other is called Ideation, Launch and Grow. Both of them are designed to help young people understand themselves primarily, and understand what they're kind of driven to do, try and help them uncover their passions, their desires, that sort of stuff. And then they go into the CRD program, Confident, Resilient and Driven, helps them in their career or help them to find a job or get ahead in the job that they might already have. So we help them with communication skills, help them with emotional intelligence. There's just so many emotionally intelligent young people in South Auckland, particularly in the Māori and Pacifica community.
That's cool.
So helping them understand that stuff that they thought was just the way that they are is actually a strength was really important for me to get across. And then the Ideation, Launch and Grow program is a 12-week program designed to kind of ignite the entrepreneurial spirit that already sits in many of these rangatahi and help them understand how to get something off the ground, how to get started, a business, a social enterprise. It could just be a small project. It could be a full-blown commercial idea. But over time, over the last couple of years, I've realised that a lot of the stuff that comes out of South Auckland is around impact.
Yeah.
They want to change lives, or they want to positively impact the community. It's not traditionally, it hasn't typically been rather, a commercial idea, to go out there and make $1 billion and be the next Steve Jobs. It's kind of, I want to do something awesome and I want to help our community. So it's helping them to understand you can do that, but you could also make some money. You can also make a living. as opposed to just sacrificing your life for stuff which a lot of young people think that that's what they should be doing. But you're like, yeah, that's cool. You can do that, but you can do the other side as well.
Yeah. And how awesome that you've lived that out, right? And now you're leading the charge. So been, what, 2 years since SAYE launched?
Yeah, just over 2 years now. What was it, 28-ish months, 2 years, 4 months-ish, not counting.
All through COVID, eh?
All through COVID. I've never had a rotation that hasn't been impacted by lockdown.
Crazy.
I've been saying to Foundation North, I can't wait till I get a rotation where I don't have to be impacted by lockdown.
It'll be too boring.
Oh, I know. Realising that's just part of life now.
Yeah, awesome. You've brought a heaps of cool topics in there that I'm sure we're going to touch on a little bit soon. But before we do that, Amber, e hoa, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
My turn. Kia ora. Ko au te uri o Ngāti Mutinga, me te Atiawa, Ngāpui, Ngāti Whātua hoki, ko Amber Taylor tōku ingoa, he kai whakahaere mātua ahau I Other Journeys. Hello guys. Hello everyone else. My name's Amber. I'm the CEO of Other Journeys, and we're a Indigenous digital technologies company operating right here in Aotearoa. We're 100% Māori owned, which is something quite unique in the tech space. And what we do is we create digital storytelling platforms that use immersive technologies. So we're looking at augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed realities, as well as artificial intelligence to build out these massive multiplayer gaming platforms that enable us to tell our stories the way we want them told.
Amazing.
Yeah. So our latest project that we launched end of last year called Tūwhiri is a project that Foundation North actually helped us to build out. It's one of the first in the world that actually enables multi-generational content across the iwi, across the country, and it rewards you for doing so. So when we get players out into location and listening and observing and learning about content, we're actually rewarding them with real-time rewards that can be redeemed within Māori-owned enterprise.
Yes.
So yeah, a lot going on in that platform.
That's
Best way
awesome.
to think of it is
and
to
how
think of
long?
Pac-Man.
So you launched Other Journeys yourself, right?
Launched Other Journeys, co-founded with Dr. Isaac Warbrick. Launched in March 2018. So we're coming up to 4 years this year.
Wow, 4 years. Still just the beginning, eh?
Yeah, just getting started.
But definitely got some amazing momentum. It's so awesome to have you here. And awesome to have, just a little side note, like Amber's been just an incredible support for everything that we've done at Ngāhere right from the inception. Has believed in us and what we're doing. So it's awesome to have people like you, like-minded people, you as well, Jerome, doing this stuff together here in South Auckland. So cheering you on always. Awesome. It's so cool listening to you guys' stories, where you've come from, what you're doing. So today as we're talking about kōwaio, knowing yourself, I guess my first question to both of you is like how has actually knowing and understanding yourself, who you are, where you come from, stuff like that, really played out in your journey so far and building what you're building? We'll start with you, Amber.
Great question.
Thanks.
I think knowing yourself is a really interesting topic because for me, I'm forever learning who I am. I feel like during different stages in life, I've changed and I've learned a little bit more about my identity as I've gone on. So when I came out of school and went into my first jobs, my identity was where I was brought up, which was in South Auckland. So Ōtara, Papatoetoe, Manurewa, that was my identity for me. And then it wasn't until later in life when I really started learning what it was to be Māori and how special that was and what a privilege that was, is when my kind of mindset changed, and that's when I really wanted to dive in deeper and to learn more about our culture and to learn where I came from, because even though I'd been down to the marae and I used to go hui hopping with my nan all the time, all over the country when we were younger, but when she passed away that stopped, and she passed away when I was still quite young, or actually I was in teenage years, so her passing then, she was the connection for us back home. And then, coming into teenage years, going home to the marae is the last thing you want to be doing on your free time. I kind of lost that connection, and then coming through into university and starting Other Journeys, that's when my mind really opened, and I was like, you know what, I have such a beautiful culture. We're such beautiful people. I need to learn more about this, and why don't I know these stories of our area? So that's one of the main reasons we built Tūwhiri, was for people who were kind of in the same situation as me. They'd grown up urban Māori and maybe had this little bit of disconnect from their culture, even though you know where you're from and you can get up and recite your pepeha, right? It's like that's not your only way to connect. So building out tūwhiri, enabling iwi to actually bring their stories into a digital platform and open it up for all the iwi or all the rangatahi coming through and growing up in that area, enabled us a way to reconnect in a soft way, I call it, a soft way of reconnection back to culture. But the idea is to spark curiosity and get people curious again about, okay, this is happening here in South Auckland, but what is happening home? What is happening on my marae? Like, how do I learn those stories and encourage people to reconnect that way? And so that's why tūwhiri was a really important build for us.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to open those channels and floodgates up for people and make it easier to reconnect.
Was that easy for you reconnecting back in, or was it challenging?
To be perfectly honest, I haven't fully reconnected back in. I am doing more with our whānau at the moment, especially the whānau in Taranaki. So of the last couple of years, I've been turning up to our iwi hui and, having a bit more say in what's going on within the whānau and decisions that have been made. Kind of staying across it has been my touch point back.
Yeah, cool.
I need to do better, so I still need to go home and learn some of our stories. So obviously activating down in Taranaki is high on my priority list.
Because it's so much more than just a decision, It's action and continual action. And just because you decide, I'm going to reconnect back to that part of me, doesn't just happen like that. That takes time.
It's a journey.
And quite often your whānau and your hapu and your iwi will make you put in the work too. They're not just going to hand it back to you on a plate. Yeah, good on you. You are doing awesome. So yeah, it's a journey. How about you, Jerome? How's it playing out? How's it played out for you?
It's funny. I mean, I relate in the sense that I too have later in life wanted to reconnect to my culture. I'm Māori, I'm Samoan, and I'm Finnish, and I want to connect to all three of that to find out a bit more about who I am and where I come from. And I kind of haven't sat in either or. I mean, I grew up and went to the marae for tangi and went there for to be family reunions, all that sort of stuff. But now, as my dad and his siblings are kind of the last generation.
The kaumatua now,
Yeah, and now he's, they're getting older, and I'm like, and the reo has stopped with that line. It makes me a bit more anxious or nervous, I guess, in thinking that my family are going to look at me, my whānau are going to look to me and go, are you on the pipeline? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea what to do. So and that's part of the reason why I'm really keen to learn more about it. But also, what I've realised through my career and through working in banking, technology, all that sort of stuff, is how unique our culture is, Māori and Pacifica specifically in the corporate space, and how kind of there's not many people in that world, right? You find kind of it's not uncommon to have under 5% in the workforce, and you're working in the bank on your floor, and I would be the only brown person in amongst kind of 200 people working on our floor. Yet I would be pulled into boardrooms or asked for advice and I never really understood why I was asked. And I used to always question myself when I would be pulled in, and people would say, well, what's your feedback and what do you think about the strategy or what we're going to be doing next year? And I don't even think they realised either, but when I reflect on that, I realise it came back to my culture, my community, my upbringing, the way that I think, the way that I see, and I think that that's a really common theme across Māori and Pacifica, is that we have this unique way of looking at life, this unique way of being, a unique way of building rapport, building relationships. We just treat situations completely differently, and people realise it, and so they ask questions about it, and so they pull you into those settings. So my identity has been coming as a journey. So important for me to understand it so that I can be confident in how I operate today. It plays a big part in what I'm doing, though. Absolutely.
Yeah. I picked up one thing from what you said, just one tiny little statement, which is questioning yourself. And I thought I'd just expand on that, or give the opportunity to expand on that, because I think that's something that we all go through as entrepreneurs and as innovators, where you question yourself, you question your decisions, you question your values, you question the promises that you might have made to people or organisations. I mean, I think maybe what I want to unpack here a little bit is like, that stuff is going to come. How do you manage it? when you're questioning yourself. You might question yourself when you're in a room of people that are 100% different to you. How do you manage it?
In my the way that I see that for me is I need to understand what makes me unique, and have now got myself to a point where I once doubted things that I would do because it was non-traditional. The way that I would do things would be kind of not how it's done typically, and so you only look back to what you know, and what you know is different to what you're doing. So you think, is this the right way of doing things? That's what I would think. I would be like, well, this is not how everyone else done it. But now I'm like, well, I do it this way because of who I am, because of my uniqueness. And so over the years, I've got to a point where I actually don't care what you think about me or how I do it. So I use that in workshops that I run. I'm like, I do a first impressions exercise where I say, what do you think about, what were your thoughts when I walked in the room? To help them understand the impression that they make. And following that, I'll say, I actually don't care what you think. And then that opens up a new conversation. It's like, well, why don't you care? Like, and that comes back to, I have to back myself more than anyone else in the room. But I think there's a journey to get to that place, I think. And it starts with understanding who you are. But I do think that's going to come up. I think it still comes up when you go and you put a funding proposal, or you pull together a contract, and you're like, yeah, I'll do this, and they say, yeah, cool, it's approved, and you're like, okay, cool, now I've got to do this. Okay,
how am I going to do this?
Yeah, so what am I going to do? How am I going to do this?
Oh no! Yeah.
A little bit of that, So you still do question it, but you're like, I've done this before. I've broken molds and done things that hasn't been done before. So there's nothing new. It's just
I definitely find it comes through in those moments where you're going beyond what you've done before, even more.
Stretching a little bit.
You might be putting in a funding application that's bigger than the biggest one you've ever done, or the the most ambitious project you've ever done. And like, I've just recently felt like that, where I was like, if I get it, if I don't get, like, if it's not successful, I'm going to cry. But if I get it, I'm going to have an anxiety attack because I just don't know how I'm going to pull through on this, man. How do you manage it, Amber?
I'm a really firm believer that everything happens for a reason, and that opportunities come your way for a reason. So whenever I start questioning myself or where I am or what I'm up to, I always kind of look at it from a point of view, well, this is here, there's a reason I'm here, so I must be able to add value from something I know. Whenever self-doubt kicks in, that's what I think to myself, okay, how do I add value in this situation? Like, there's obviously a reason someone's asked me to be here or asked me to do this talk. So, it's working out what that is. And then I think once I establish that, I'm away, because it's, you're back on track again. It's like, oh, yeah, I can talk about blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, awesome. And I've seen you in lots of different spaces too, and seen the confidence that you walk in. It's really, really cool, actually. It's inspiring. Thank you. All right, so why do you think, like, I'm really just keen to hear your guys' thoughts and what you mull over about why it is important and what we do to actually know yourself, or like say, talking to someone that's out there thinking, man, I've got this idea for an initiative I want to do, or I want to make a difference in this way. Why do you think that it's important that they know who they are and they're confident in who they are?
Keeps me grounded. It makes me kind of know where I'm heading, what I'm doing, or why I'm doing it, rather. And I guess I might be jumping ahead, but it comes back to if I know who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing, then I'm happy to put in the hard yards to make it work, like in terms of getting something off the ground. If it's just purely a commercial play, just to make a bit of cash in the bank, it'll last for 5 minutes for me. But if it's aligned with what I'm truly motivated and driven by, I'm going to get up late, wake up early in the morning, put in the enormous amount of effort that's required to get it off the ground. And I think that's how and why it's successful, why I've continued to secure funding, because I'm passionate about it. And I think people sense that when you talk to them. They can tell that it's not just, if it was for the money, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I would be doing something else about that, because it's not about that.
Yeah. There's a saying that I hear you say quite a bit, where your culture, your community, and your upbringing is your strength.
Yeah.
Why don't you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I think that after talking to a bunch of rangatahi and over the last couple of years in particular, you hear them say something like, I mean, the stuff that comes out of their mouth, like I'm from Aotearoa, you know, these opportunities don't come to South Auckland, or I'm, you know, I grew up around in a Pacifica household, so I was taught to sit in the back and keep my mouth shut and let anyone older than you has more experience and more privileged and they know more than you. And I grew up in that same setting, and also, you know, I am Māori, so I'm not, or I am Pacifica, or I'm from South Auckland, or I'm from Tokoroa, so I'm not, and there's this kind of undertone of being less intelligent or less onto it or less potential to start a successful business or to be the next big tech entrepreneur company, whatever that is, that there's this undertone in it or this doubt in it. And it's not until you look back and you're like, man, this is a strength. Like the fact that you were raised in a community like South Auckland or like Tokoroa, or you were raised around Māori and Pacifica values, that sort of stuff has made a whole lot of emotionally intelligent people and given you values and morals and ethics that are absent in many spaces, but are hugely valuable, particularly in the business world. I know that I had a very successful sales career. I was a really good salesperson, and it came down to my ability to build rapport, which came down to my upbringing, the way that I could build a connection with someone, the way that Māori want to know a little bit more about you than just what's on the surface. You know, which is why we do our pepea, which is why we talk about where we're from. It's that is innate in Māori and Pacifica. You want to know a little bit more. I want to know where you're from and why. You know, not just what's on the surface. And I think because of that innate desire for that sort of relationship building, you can build rapport really quickly, but people don't see all that stuff as a strength. Particularly young people, they don't see that stuff. They don't see that growing up in this environment, in this community as a strength, but it absolutely is. So I'm really.
And it's not necessarily portrayed that way in the media and stuff like that either. So
in fact, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, even I get really frustrated when I drive around Manawa, and the grass berms are like all overgrown. And then I go through and drive to my meeting in the city or drive past Whenua, and it's all nicely, tidily manicured. And I just think that would never happen. And they would never let that stuff happen. But it just creates this.
You're revealing your OCD, bro. It's all in the berms,
Little things like that. I'm like, so it just frustrates me because I just know that there's this mindset that just continually perpetuates. And it's not supported or helped by people.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that media representation of South Auckland because I've been here all my life. And I got up and gave a talk at a school one time and started with opening. It's like I dropped out of school at 16. I didn't get school C. I became a mum, got pregnant at 17, had my kid at 18. And it wasn't until I was around 19 when I could put him into daycare that I decided to go back and try and get an education through university. When I signed up for that first year, I absolutely hated it because it was full of like just kids younger than me that were coming straight from school. So I found it really hard to go back and start learning again, but it's something that I had to push myself through to get to a point where I could provide for my son, because that was my main goal of going into university. It's like, okay, I'm in this situation now, so now I've got to go provide for my kid or be able to provide for him, which is why I went to uni. And when I open like that and you see the look on kids' faces and they're like, oh, but isn't she like the CEO of that game company? And you see them ticking over, and then I go, that's the portrayal that media would give you if they were looking to profile a South Auckland statistic, right? That would be their headline. Young mum, high school dropout, starts game studio in South Auckland. Like nothing about the games that we've created, the award-winning platforms we've built, and it's that whole portrayal that I think really plays in the back of people's minds. So when I talk to especially rangatahi, but also adults as well, and we're looking at, well, you know, I grew up in Otara. My primary school was Flatbush Primary School. Like we had one playground back then, real small school, not a lot of resource going in. but I learned to negotiate at that school because you had to. If you wanted to play with the rugby ball, you had to negotiate, right? You had to build a team of friends to help you secure that rugby ball so you guys could go play your own game. So you learn to negotiate from a really young age. You learn empathy because, you know, there's not a lot of people around you that will help you, so you rely on each other in those situations, in the classroom, on the sports field, out in the playground. You know, you're learning all these soft skills that are really relevant in business and will help you grow a company. But they never focus on these skills. Like, people talk about grades all the time. And I remember when we started our internships program and WinTech came to us and they're like, oh, please take some interns. I was like, cool, send me their CVs. And the careers manager there goes, oh, I've filtered out all the high grade ones. I was like, I don't want those. It's like, send me everything. She's like, why is that? I said, because grades are the last thing I look at. So I don't need to know what grades they got. I need to know, can they communicate well? Are they competent? Do they have good time management? I was like, I can teach them anything they need to know in that skill set. So grades isn't important. It's the soft skills that we need and their passion. What are they doing outside of work or outside of tech, and how might what we're creating actually become something that they're passionate about?
Like we're talking a little bit about stereotyping too, right? And how there's a stereotype for South Auckland young people. What are you seeing as far as stereotyping within the tech scene?
I don't know if, so there's been a real shift I've seen over the last couple of years where employers are actually really sitting up and taking notice of our Māori Pacifica students coming through, or early career graduates coming through the system. Like, there is a real eye-opening, like an awakening, I think, that's happening across the tech sector, where they're seeing relevance in the culture and our upbringing and just the way we operate.
There are a lot of negative actions that can come from stereotyping people, and I believe that unless you're completely true to yourself, you can't understand the way that stereotypes can affect a people in general. Stereotypes can be seen in our communities amongst race and religion, amongst age, amongst physical well-being, amongst the wealth of communities as well, and stereotypes don't really help you to get an action completed. Stereotypes aren't really a motivator either. It's not something that we look forward to having in our communities, but definitely is something that's in there. We feel like we belong to parts of groups in a positive way, but when those parts of groups are changed to fit the story inside somebody else's head, that's when the stereotype comes out. An example of stereotypes can be when we assume something about somebody or about a group of somebody's, and it's actually based on nothing true. In South Auckland, we can't afford to have stereotypes. We can't afford to segregate off. We can't be seen to be serving one type of a people, because firstly, that's not fair. Secondly, it doesn't work towards our values and the foundation that we've built Whenua Warrior on. But also, it works both ways. We, as Māori wahine serving the whenua against our ancestral knowledge, can also be stereotyped as women who don't have shoes on and play in the dirt all the time. But what it actually comes down to, and the way that we can get rid of stereotyping, is understanding the values of those people and understanding what it is that we're working towards as a community before you offer the solution to mend anything or fix anything or try to bring a people back together when they're probably not even apart. Whenua Warrior believes that with what we offer to community, stereotyping isn't possible, because we're all responsible to be able to eat, to feed, and to ensure that our whānau continue to survive in a way that flourishes within the whānau. So with Whenua Warrior, we believe that everyone has a responsibility to understand how it is to grow food, how we can connect to people to help other people to survive better, and what it is that we can learn so that we can empower others to be just as successful and just as flourishing in our food systems.
Like, one thing that we're really good at as Pacifica and as Māori is working for the better of the collective. Like, I haven't met one Māori company that goes out and just wants to make money for themselves. Not one.
True.
I don't know anyone in that space.
Yeah.
So true.
And you look at all these other tech companies that set up, and they're like, oh, we can't find people to work for us. We've got an employment shortage. You can't. They're like, oh, we can't get funding. Why are they funding you? They're not funding games. It's like, yeah, but we don't operate the same way you do. We don't run a business model that's just solely focused on revenue and profit.
Yeah.
And stuff. We work with people. We work with community. We work with schools. We're looking at how do we create greater good and greater impact across a wide range of areas, not just ourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's not just something we do. I know it's not something, we're not the only company doing that. It's like every other Māori company I know is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's our strong point.
Yeah,
It's
for
like
sure.
we operate like that regardless of what situation we're in.
Are you seeing stereotyping hold young people back, Jerome?
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And sometimes I will say to them, there is a stereotype, but it's up to you whether or not you let it hold you back, because it's you're the only. I always say this, that you may not be able to control what has happened in the past and why you are where you are today, but you absolutely have every ability to change the decision that you make tomorrow to get to where you are and where you want to be. And because it's everywhere. The stereotype is everywhere. The society, community, your parents, your aunties, your uncles, they will subtly throw stuff out there without even realising it, that kind of reinforces the stereotypes that are out there about rangatahi, particularly those in South Auckland. The stats will just being another number, and then the government and media will just continue to throw that stuff out there and kind of, it really frustrates me. It's one of my biggest things that just infuriates me, which is why, and I think it starts, which is why you can't necessarily change all that stuff. So, but you can change, you can change yourself. So I will help you individually to be able to look through that and understand all those things that make you amazing.
Yeah. We talked a little bit too about culture. Like both of you have talked about wanting to reconnect to who you are as Māori or Pasifika, and then how you're integrating that into the mahi that you do. I thought it might be cool to get like an actual example, like tell us about a scenario where you've seen and felt what it was like to bring culture into your initiative, whether it's positive or negative. I'll give an example to give you a bit of time to have a think about it. I got your back. But in the early days of setting up ngahere, and at that stage what was called te hao manuko, I just found myself in a conversation with someone who's a really well-known investor in Aotearoa, and we were just chatting, and he was finding out a little bit about what we were doing, and his response to me was something along the lines of doing programs and initiatives that are just for Māori and Pasifika are never going to work. You people just need to learn how to live in the real world. And I can just see you guys, like your eyes going like, what the heck? And you can imagine, I mean, I'm pretty chill as a person, but some things will really rack me up, and that racked me up straight away, sitting there face to face with this guy who anyone else in that situation would probably be full of ego trying to get his money. But he just said that to me, and I obviously disagreed. And we just went into this, it was almost an argument, but it was just a heated conversation from my side trying to be like, no, what you're saying is wrong, and him sitting there just being absolutely convinced that what he's saying is right, and that from his perspective that's what he's seen. And I think for me what I experienced was this frustration where I felt like we were just bashing heads over this topic that we weren't going to agree on, but the challenge for me was to find a way to help him see that he was wrong. And so we had the conversation, and it got really heated, and I got to a point where I was able to explain to him, and the phrase that I got to in that conversation is something that I've continued to use as we're building Grid Manukau and the different communities that we build. And the concept came to me that was like every living thing has an ideal environment in order for it to thrive. And it's different depending on what it is, whether it's a fish or a tree or a mushroom or whatever. And I said to him, it's the same for us as Māori and Pasifika people. There are environments that we're more likely to thrive in than others. There's different ways that we like to do things. And I was like, imagine an environment where you walk in as a Māori and It's kapahaka season, so people are all practicing their kapahaka, and the boys have got a black eye because they just hit each other with the taiaha, and then your cousin comes in and brings baby and they feeding bub in the corner. And then on the wall are pictures of Māori atua that have been designed by some of your whānau. I was like, that's a different environment, a place where you can come in your bare feet, you can sit on the floor and still have a professional meeting. That's how our people work, how our people interact, what's important to our people. That environment doesn't exist here in what you have. And that was how I could finally get him to see what was important, what we were doing, and something that's helped me from that point on to describe what it is that we do, what it is that we create. We create environments for our people to thrive, and within that, then we can see the outcomes that we want. So that was an example for me where I felt the tension, I felt the fire, I felt the frustration, but I also managed to find a way through that into something that was constructive. The next time, I mean, since then that guy's been like super, like he's been awesome. He thinks that I'm awesome. He thinks what we're doing is awesome. He supports us and stuff like that. I don't personally have a lot of time for him after that, but it changed his perspective, and I'm glad that I stuck to it and that I didn't just get pissed off and swear at him and walk off or something like that. Yeah, who wants to share their story?
I love that thriving environment. That's a great analogy, especially for innovation.
Yeah.
And I really think that we are true innovators. Like that's where Māori and Pacifica thrive.
Yeah.
In terms of reconnection, when Isaac and I first started out of journeys, I don't think we fully understood what we had. And because when we built out the very first prototype, which was our Manu's Journeys app, it was really based on our own personal needs at the time. So a need to see more of our stories out in the public domain, a need to create these safe platforms for iwi to tell stories the way they want them to be told. And so when we started that first prototype, we rolled it out across community, and we actually thought our market for this particular app was Māori. Because we were Māori, we felt it, we were connecting. Stakeholders that we were working with and community members we worked with to produce it, they were Māori, they were feeling it, promoting it across their networks. And it wasn't until we showcased at a wider event out in Manawa actually, with Pānuku, and we learnt from different community members just how relevant our stories were to them. So these are like different cultures, Indian, Chinese people were there, like just a whole range. Well, you know what South Auckland culture is like, just this real diverse range of people who really resonated with the stories, which to me was mind blowing, because we always thought, Māori are going to uptake this. This is the market. This is for them. And it was actually everyone else who stopped and they were like, this is so cool. I've lived here for like 20 odd years and had no idea how awesome the Pūnui stream was and what that meant to the local iwi here. And now I'm going to do my best to be good kaitiaki of that area, because, we need to bring some of these manu back. And this is the stuff that they were learning from the platforms we had built. So for me, that was just like, okay, now we need to take this prototype and just scale it as big as we can. And so that's awesome. Kind of what started us on this particular pathway, this journey that we're on now. Is learning that from people outside of our culture and just how much they appreciated what we were doing, and the knowledge and the education and the history that we were laying down in a space that was relevant to their kids now, because I don't know a lot of kids that still use the library, but they're all on digital devices and mobiles. So they were like, oh, you've just brought this into a digital space, which now makes it relevant for future generations. And I want my kids to know the history of this area. We're not mana whenua, but we've been here our entire lives. They're born here, they should know it. So that to us, that was really cool. That was our
that's pretty
We've got something. Now we're going to do better.
And like you said, it's more relevant than you think. It's not just for our people.
It was that initial contact was mind blowing.
Awesome. How about you, bro?
I guess in the way that we do or I run programs, and kind of the concepts of how we deliver them. Funny, I created the program and looked at how we're going to facilitate these workshops and certain aspects of it, without actually consciously thinking, how do we make this right for or right for Māori or anything like that. And what I realised is that the way that we do things naturally is just the way that you... So having whakawhanaungatanga or is just something that you naturally do, or with a resiliency model that I designed, I pulled together the way to understand resilience and how you can build and grow resilience. And it aligns with Te Whare Tapawha, but by naturally you kind of just do that stuff, or pulling people into the room and just the way that you interact or the way that you build rapport. I realised that when it's effective and you just naturally do it, I look back now and I'm like, oh, that actually does align with Te Ao Māori and how we should be doing things. So I think it's something that people don't realise that you even do. Even if people think that if you don't speak the reo, you don't have the Te Ao Māori way, or you don't understand what that is, but you might find that the way that you operate is that way.
It's intrinsic,
it's intrinsic, and you don't realise until you actually learn about it, and you're like, oh, that's why I do that, or that's why I operate that way, or that's why I said that, or that's why I meet like that, or that's why this stuff is important in my workshops.
And I think that's what we're talking about, right? Like who you are and what you have to bring is... that's it. Yeah. That's all you need to do. That's all you need to be, and the way that you think and the way that you see the world is so important. And there's a reason behind that. It comes from your tupuna, it comes from your upbringing, it comes from the environments that you've been in. And knowing that and using that as a strength as opposed to getting stuck in something like comparison or stereotypes and allowing that to intimidate you out of it. Yeah.
Mine was the maramataka. When we started doing work on the maramataka, because I didn't know anything about our lunar phase until we started building out manu and the story content there. And once I got a better understanding and got to meet with our experts and, learn the kōrero behind the moon phases, all of a sudden everything made sense to me, like my moods. I was like, oh.
So look at the moon, eh? Oh, yeah, okay, I'm all right.
Like, that's not your excuse.
Yeah, that's not your excuse.
I was like,
doesn't make it okay.
The maramataka, it's why I'm like this today.
It's where those werewolf stories come from, eh?
With my identity, I've struggled a bit, as you do, growing up as a child with a German Lebanese father and a Māori mother who grew up in Tāmaki Makaurau. We were very detached from our Māori home roots, which is up in Northland in Opanoni, Hokianga. And then you go into a school that has children of all shades of the rainbow doing all sorts of different things, from elastics and knuckle bones on that side to practicing the haka and poi on that side. Understanding who you are as a child in South Auckland can be a little bit difficult, and I was fortunate enough to grow up without seeing colour. I was also fortunate enough to grow up without seeing any type of negative action from our culture or from any cultures surrounding us. I enjoyed that about myself. I enjoyed seeing people equal from all backgrounds, and I've revisited that as an adult because Whenua Warrior allows us to get into spaces where there are different shades of the rainbow, and the value of Whenua Warrior is seen by all shades of that rainbow because we are trying to serve all. And the reason I do that is because I identify with all, and I identify as equal with all as well.
That's so awesome. We had a cool pre-chat before this about knowing what your calling is and the role that knowing your calling plays in actually being able to lead and drive initiatives and innovate and stuff. I think what are you... I'm going to ask you, Jerome, but what is a calling in your mind?
The thing that I most closely align it with is my why, but it kind of is what I'm most passionate about, what I am most driven to do, what I feel like I naturally do or have done, and that's what I reflect on when I think about what am I called to do, why am I here, is what have I done in the past. When I look back over the last kind of 15 odd years, what have I done that I've loved doing that I potentially wasn't even paid for, and it didn't really matter to me, was the stuff that I was doing with rangatahi. So I was doing that stuff outside of my full-time job, right? I had a sales career where I would be earning well over a 6-figure income for selling a piece of technology into a corporate. And it used to infuriate me that I could do this job and get paid a really good salary, great commission, yet I would go and want to try and work in the community with rangatahi and expect to be paid kind of $40,000-$50,000. So I would do that stuff. We ran a charitable youth trust, my wife and I. And then when I look back at that, I think that's the stuff that I would do. If I had all the money in the world, that's the stuff, and I didn't need anything, I would do something to impact the lives of rangatahi, of young people, of young adults, of people, to help them do something they never thought was possible.
Yeah.
And so that's what when I reflect on a calling or a why, I think it's that thing that's going to get you up early in the morning, stay up late at night, and work through to get your outcomes that you're wanting to do. And if I can say that about what it is that I do today, then I think that I'm doing it, and I absolutely am. If someone asked me the other day if I won lotto, I don't buy lotto, but if I won lotto, what would I do with it? And I legitimately, and it sounds really cliche and it sounds really dumb, but I would legitimately scale the program that I currently deliver. I would scale the impact. I would impact lives of people across New Zealand, and have people go out there and do the stuff that I'm doing. Find equally passionate, equally driven, equally driven to make people's lives better.
Was it scary walking away from the money for your passion?
Absolutely, it was. But because I'm like the mitigator of risk, it took me a long time to get to a point where I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to make the jump. I mean, I've got a young family, got a mortgage, live in Auckland. It was a big hurdle, but I just lined everything up, made sure it's not impossible to get out of that and get into something that you're passionate about.
Yeah,
I've realised.
I honestly think that's such good advice. I had some similar advice when I made the jump from being in a safe employed position into self-employment, was to actually get yourself sorted first.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Fia. Is to get yourself sorted first. Like you might know exactly what it is that you want to do, but if you can't practically do it, be patient. Set yourself up, set your family up, so that when you do take the jump, and it's a hard jump, it's pretty brutal. That you're ready to roll. And
I also think when I talk to people or young people, young adults that are kind of figuring out whether or not they do this now, and I say, what's your situation at the moment? And they'll say, I don't have any children, I don't have a partner. I'm like, jump in there, get it done now, before you get to that point, because your level of risk is a lot lower than where it could be. Your perceived risk, I guess. It's kind of like
it's just you going to be on noodles, not your whole family.
My whole family. It's just you. Like, you're the only one. You're the only one that's going to be on noodles. Exactly. It's exactly that though. Whereas for me, I was like, if it doesn't work out, in my head, when we originally did this, I was like, okay, if it doesn't work out, I can sell my house. That's what I was in my head. I was like, I'll sell my house and we can rent. Okay, cool. There's a way out. So as long as I knew there was a way out, and that it wasn't going to be, we're going to be living on the street. So I was like, okay, cool, we can sell my house.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty big deal, right? But I had to be comfortable with that. I had to get to a point where I was like, am I comfortable enough to potentially fail here, sell my house and rent? So, and talk to my wife and go, are we okay with that? Yeah. And so, you're like, yeah, cool, we're good. Okay, cool, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then I had corporate training stuff on the side as well. So I also started up another company where I was delivering corporate training to kind of charge the dollar. And give back to the community. And
you've since then invested in another business too, eh?
Yeah, so we bought a gym here in Manukau with a business partner, and
right before lockdown.
Right before the smooth recent lockdown, I was like, yeah, good choice. Yeah, but
you're also Jerome.
Love that
stuff. Got any free passes? What's your thoughts around knowing your calling, Amber?
This is a tricky one for me because I'm not quite there yet. So I'm still on the journey or the pathway to what I think is my calling. I'm kind of in a position at the moment where we're doing good. Like, it's great. The impact we're having is really good. We're doing everything that we've set out to do as Other Journeys. But for me, that's not quite hitting the spot. Like, I know there's something else that I need to be doing, and where I will focus on when I do look to exit Other Journeys. But I think, this is definitely all part of my journey. My calling within Ara is to flood the world with Indigenous stories. And so once we've done that, I think that's when I'll be satisfied and be like,
it's cool.
That was my calling at that stage in life. And then when I start my next phase in life, I'll have a clear kind of journey mapped out in that space. Is be like, okay, I did that. I achieved that. Well, we achieved that as a company.
So why do you think it's important, or why did you need to have a journey to what you feel is your higher calling versus just going straight there?
I don't know how to get there.
Straight up, eh?
I think it comes down to, like, life experience. Like, I didn't wake up at 5 and be like, yep, I want to go out and do that. That's where I'm going to end up in life. Like, I had no idea what I was going to be. I wanted to, first I wanted to marry Will Smith. That was my life goal plan.
Didn't happen?
Didn't happen. Gutted. And then after that, I decided, I want to be a forensic scientist. This is like when I was at intermediate. I was like, I want to do forensics because I don't know why I was that weird child that murders really fascinated me.
Yeah, inquisitive.
Yeah. So I wanted to be a forensic scientist. I got into coding for a little bit, so I learned a little bit of code. Very quickly discovered I did not like that at all.
Yeah.
And then ended up in the research and innovation space, and then into Other Journeys with the immersive stuff. But I think without experiencing that, I wouldn't know that what I want to do at the end of, like, my career pathway is what I want to do. Like, without going through all of those different experiences and learning and career opportunities and just diverting every time something didn't work for me. Like, I didn't stick at it. I kind of went, oh, okay, that didn't work. What am I going to do now?
Is that a destination for you, or do you think it'll evolve again?
It might evolve again.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm like, so I think my calling is getting into angel investment. I want to actually reshape that whole landscape with a particular focus on Indigenous and wahine. Females coming into this space and creating opportunities for them to actually grow their company. So that's, for me, I think, is my calling, and having impact and adding value in that space. But there's no way I could really do that without experiencing it myself with Other Journeys. But then, the flip side of that is the mahi that we're doing within the company is so important to me that, I want to hit that overarching goal of flooding the world with our stories before I do start looking at that other phase.
Yeah. I think I heard you say a little bit earlier, Jerome, something along the lines of, like, your calling is, like, aligned with your why. Do you just want to touch a little bit on how that, like, helps you when you make decisions?
Yeah. So I use it as my filter. I mean, my why is to help someone achieve something that they never thought was possible, so that they can begin to identify, understand, and realize their potential. And when I can do that with someone, that's what absolutely drives me. And so I use that as a filter for my no decisions. When someone asks me and presents an opportunity, says, hey, do you want to do this work, or do you want to pick up this opportunity? If it doesn't align with my why, I won't be overtly driven to get it done, and it won't be high on my priority list. So now I know that I can confidently say no, whereas before I used to always struggle with saying no. All the time I would be saying yes all the time, and then work myself to the ground in an unsatisfying way. It wasn't fulfilling at all. It was just me doing a whole bunch of work because I was passionate about helping people, and I thought that was what I should do. I should say yes. But now I'm able to say no because I chuck on my why filter, I guess, and go, does it align with that? No, it doesn't. Okay, well then, Jerome, you need to say no. Sometimes I find it really hard still to say no, but because I know it doesn't align with it, I'm like, okay, it's not going to help.
It's empowering, when you can do that. You can say no.
Yeah.
As hard as I'm the same. I struggle to say no all the time. I'm getting better.
I think that's a really key point though for businesses, for people getting into something, is that the ability to say no, and you have to eventually get comfortable with being able to.
I feel like there's kind of seasons too in the growth of your business where there
Might
is
be
a
yes,
season
yes,
where you
yes.
have to say
Yeah.
yes. Like
Yeah.
you just have to take whatever
Yeah.
opportunity comes. Or maybe when you're still trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
what it is. And then once you know, or once you have a reputation or skill level,
Yeah.
then you can stick to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because is that important for you, knowing where you want to be? Does it help you with your decision making and stuff like that now?
Absolutely. But I base all of our decisions on how does it align with our company values, because we're quite particular on what we build, how we build, who we work with, even companies we associate with. Like our due diligence is in that back end. It's like, okay, how do you treat your staff? Where are you outsourcing, and how are you paying them? Like, so we won't partner with anyone if they're not ticking those boxes for us, because that's something that's really important for us
Yeah.
as a company. So that kind of takes care of that bit as well. And then the other thing I really look at is what's the return on investment to the company. And this is what I do a lot with some of the talks that I go on. And they're like, oh, what is your fee? You know, how much do you charge? Blah, blah, blah. And when I was talking to other people who are looking to start charging their time in those keynote conference speaks or panel talks or whatever you're doing, it's like, what's the return on your company? Because every minute that I've spent away from core company business is actually costing us to run. So even though I'll go and do school talks for free, so that's one thing that we always do, any one of my staff, we don't charge schools for our time to go out and talk to kids.
Yeah.
But that return on investment is not about promoting other, it's about them seeing other people that are like them, that talk like them,
cool.
that sound like
Yeah.
them, that look like them
Yeah.
in the tech space.
Yeah.
So that's return on investment. So that's a clear tick. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Chuck us on the tour or whatever it is. And if we can squeeze it in. Whereas you get the other conferences and they're like, oh, can you get up and talk about the AI that you're using in your game? Because we really want to show the community what Māori are doing in this space.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Who's your audience? And you look down the audience list and you're like, okay, how does that benefit Māori? Like you're getting us to get up and present, and we're adding all this value to your conference and to the participants and the audience, but actually what is the outcome that we're providing, or what is the outcome for us in this space? So whether it's like looking at, okay, it's all the directors and CEOs of these big corporates in the audience, so presenting to them could be a good thing because it might open their eyes to hiring Māori and Pacifica in that space. So that's a little bit of a tick.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're brought in as what I call the tick box, where they're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
we're meeting that cultural diversity because we've got other journeys here presenting and they're 100% Māori owned. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Nah, go find someone else to do it.
Yeah. And you do, you have to make that decision for yourself or for your company. You have to think through that and think, where do we stand on this? I find that challenging as well. I've got to a point where I say no to most of those opportunities now, unless it's someone that has invested in my journey so far, or someone who I have that relationship with, or it has a good investment. The ones that crack me up are the ones that charge people to attend, but then they don't pay anything to the speaker. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
If you're charging them, then I'm charging you. Those ones crack me up all the time. Anyway, we're going to wrap up real soon. We're true to form, we've gone way over time. But just this one last topic because it's really cool. Authenticity, being authentic and being yourself. So we find often, all three of us, I know we've chatted about this, that you find yourself in lots of different spaces, lots of different rooms with different people. Sometimes you're the smartest in the room or the most experienced in the room. Sometimes you're the dumbest or the least experienced. Sometimes you're the token Māori. Sometimes if you're half caste like me, you might be the token white person. Like, you just find yourself in all these different spaces, and you morph and you bend, not so much who you are, but how you present yourself and what you're saying and how you say it to suit that audience and to achieve the outcome that you want to achieve. But I guess what I wanted us to touch on here is, how do you then manage that to still stay tūturu or true to who you are, and not allow that to, because I find it does impact the way that I think about myself, depending on which room. Sometimes I might come out of a room and feel like I'm the dumbest, and that I was the dumbest in the room, and I have to make sure that that doesn't impact me in a negative way. And on the flip side, you could come out and feel a little bit cocky or a bit egotistical if you blew it away or whatever. How do you guys manage that level of just being you and being okay with who you are, regardless of the room that you're in?
I learned a really long time ago that the best opportunities and the best learnings come from being the dumbest person in the room. So I actually now aim to be in those hui where I am the dumbest person in the room, because I learned so much, and I learned this from my corporate background at the university when I started getting pulled into these meetings alongside my director, and I didn't really understand why she was doing it, but actually watching the way people operate in different circumstances and watching the way she negotiated and actually presented and held her ground in that space was just eye-opening for me. So yeah, ever since then I've taken all those learnings and I try to be the dumbest person in the room. But on authenticity, this is a hard one for me, and like our kōrero out there, I was like, what is it to be authentic? Because I have multiple hats and I change them depending on the situation that I'm in. But I think if I reflect back to it, no matter what situation I'm in, our core values, our why, our mission, our ethos behind the company, it's all the same. It's just delivered in a different way. So depending on who you're engaging with, and I think I was saying this before as well, it's like I can go out and present to schools in rangatahi and, you know, the outfit's casual, the talk's casual, it's conversational because that's how you engage properly. Whereas if you're presenting in the corporate world and you've got a room full of middle-aged men, women, all very high-tech, scientific, looking for an actual ROI on their time being there, your whole persona changes. But the one thing that doesn't change is your company ethos, your values, your mission, your mahi, what you're doing. That always stays the same. It's just your delivery that changes. So I think being able to do that and do it on the spot when you need to is really valuable. But at the same time, because your kōrero is always the same from the heart, it's not, once you get used to it, it's not too stressful.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does.
Kind of just like...
You can flow in and out,
Yeah.
without it being too... Sound like a waterfall.
Yeah. Okay, use all the tech jargon over here, but don't use it over here.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I think I understand working in different settings, right? Working with rangatahi, I don't use the same language that I do when I'm trying to get some funding across the line, or I'm talking to a corporate about getting some corporate training delivered or trying to sell that into the business. Quite different way of communicating, but the same intention behind it is to build rapport and build connection. And so that to me is the authentic part of that, is what is the reason why I'm there and what is it that I'm doing? Does that remain the same? I always say to people that if you were to see me in at home, or if you were to see me at the gym, or if you were to see me at work or at school, I'm pretty sure you would say that I'm the same person. I might speak a little bit differently, but I know that I'm the same person. So if I had a young person come up to me while they would come into my workplace when I'd work at the bank, and they would see me and they're like, oh, this is the same Jerome. And then they would see me engaging with my staff, and I'd be talking to them, and they'd look at me and go, well, this is the same Jerome that runs the youth organization. And so they would see that, and for them it was like, I can be that, I can be me in this setting, and you can, and you make slight adjustments because you need to, not to try and put on a facade, but it was, for me, the way that I would see that is it's trying to build connection and rapport, and what was required in that setting was slightly different to what was required in another setting.
Yeah.
So it wasn't me going, okay, now I need to try and be someone else, although that was absolutely happening in the earlier stages where I was trying to be something that I wasn't.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I kind of got more confident in my identity and who I was, and got to the point where I was like, yeah, cool, I'm me and I'm confident in what I can do. That I got to the point where I was like, I'm just adapting my style.
Yeah.
I'm not changing who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good, And I think, like, our first episode, we talked all about relationships and people, and how it is actually the relationships that you have that drives your success.
Yep.
Whether it's the people
Absolutely.
supporting
100%.
you, or the people that you're serving, the whānau that are around you and the love that you have, that is actually the key to your success. And every good relationship is based on you being you being authentic. And it's the same in this scene. It's the same in business.
So true.
It's the same in trying to be an innovator. You have to just be yourself, because South Auckland, I mean, Auckland may feel big to some people, but it's small. South Auckland's small. You know who everyone is, and it's only a matter of time before you get seen as a faker, someone that's trying to pretend to be someone that they're not, or someone that's not true to their word, or someone that is a different person in every scenario, and that essentially means that people don't trust you.
Yeah.
So authenticity is super important. It's challenging though. It is challenging, especially for us as Māori and Pacifica to stay strong in that. And we were raised by people that potentially were at the end of the spectrum or the season of being ashamed of being Māori.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to deal with that as well and get back to that point of being proud of who we are. But yeah, that was an awesome kōrero. Looking forward to having you back in episode 4, I think, talking about leadership. So thank you both for jumping on today. Any just final last words before we wrap up? Let's say a piece of advice to an innovator or a change maker that is just on the verge of stepping out. What would you say to them?
I'm quite simple. I would say just do it. Like, just make sure you covered your risk and jump in there. And if it's your passion, if it's your why, make it happen. I'm so over the moon that I decided to make this jump after kind of 15 years in the corporate scene. That I did what I'm doing. So just do it.
Don't take 15 years.
It sounds long. Does it sound long?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it long? I feel like that's long.
It's you, bro. It's your journey.
I feel like I'm getting old.
Own it.
Yeah.
That's long. No. What about you, Amber?
Just a little bit.
My piece of advice would be, just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean you shouldn't be the one to do it.
Yes.
So go out, take the risks, have a crack at it.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? You get told no.
Yeah.
And don't take no for an answer either. Go out and try someone else. But yeah,
awesome.
That's my piece
Ka
of
nui
advice.
te mihi kōrero. Thank you for jumping on. Shout out to Foundation North for making this happen. Hei kona. Ngā mihi nui, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed that episode. Ka Tū Maia was proudly brought to you by Foundation North. To enhance lives, Foundation North provides funding and support to initiatives large and small to respond to their communities now and for generations to come. Check them out on Facebook, Instagram, or www.foundationnorth.org.nz.